Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Great to see you all in our webinar. My name is Anna Grace. In a moment, I'll introduce myself and my colleague, but welcome to our Insight into Action webinar. We're very excited to share with you some of the ways that the Mentor Collective platform could be helping you intervene early with your students based on great data-driven insights about sense of belonging and academic self-efficacy. Great. Let me say hello and have my colleague Shannon here say hello. My name is Anna Meek. I am the Vice President of Partner Success here at Mentor Collective. I lead the team that supports our partner institutions in their adoption of our technology and the selection of best practices that help them achieve their goals. I am also a higher education professional. I have my graduate degree in college student development and counseling and started my career in the profession of assessment and strategic enrollment management. All in all, a huge proponent of higher education and a very big data geek. So very excited to talk with you today about how we can assist you with your students as well. And I'm joined by my colleague, Dr. Shannon LeCount. Shannon, you want to say hello?
I do. Hello, everybody. And thank you to the person whose picture has a bulldog in it, because I'm a dog lover and a specific lover of bulldogs. I'm Shannon LeCount. I'm joining Anna Meek today as the Principal Product Manager at Mentor Collective. I work on strategic projects, strategic initiatives, and that often involves special cohorts or research and analysis around the data associated with our mentorship programs. My background in higher ed started in 2005. I was a faculty member. I'm a speech pathologist by trade and taught both clinical and didactic courses. So assessment was a natural thing for me. And that's what led me to administration in higher ed, where I've been in institutional research and institutional effectiveness until coming to Mentor Collective. So personally, I am a first-generation student. I was also a first-generation faculty member, so I like to use that as an example, and it definitely influences all of the work I do in higher ed.
Great. So before we get started with our content, just a few suggestions about how to make the most of your time on our Zoom environment today. Your audio is on mute, although we'll welcome questions at the end and comments. This is purposely a small group environment so that you have a chance to ask questions and get some interaction with the Mentor Collective team here in a bit of a deeper dive way. We would love for you to share your cameras so that you can see each other and get to know each other. And our colleague Alex here has dropped in the chat. Please introduce yourself. We would love to know your name, your institution. Shannon and I would also appreciate knowing what your level of experience is with Mentor Collective. Have you seen a demonstration before? Are you currently evaluating a partnership with us? Is this your first time learning or hearing about us? That will allow us to make sure that we meet your needs in the time that we have today. And then your engagement and your participation is very welcome. You can use that same chat feature to ask questions. We will pause periodically to answer them, make sure we get to anything that's been in the chat, or share reactions if you would like to. All right, with that, we are actually going to get started with a poll. So kicking us off on our topic today, coming into this conversation, what data do you have at your fingertips? Do you have data pertaining to students' sense of belonging, academic self-efficacy, academic help seeking, all of the above, none of the above? How are you auditing your data availability today?
Looks like there is exactly the responses we are expecting, Anna Meek, in that there are some lucky souls who are able to see all of the information. Some campuses have availability in a few of the areas, but sadly, most don't have access to the information from students, and that is common, and that's one of the reasons we exist, and it's one of the reasons this webinar is happening today. So thank you, everybody, for sharing the information. Anything else from you, Anna Meek, before I take over?
Go for it, Shannon.
Oh, but I should share the results because not everyone can see the results. I kind of gave the audio version before that, so I'll stop sharing those now. And let's talk about, or what I want to address with over the next 10 minutes or so is some of the value that Mentor Collective and a partnership with Mentor Collective can bring to campus. Many of you may have already had initial conversations or several conversations with people from Mentor Collective. Hopefully I'll have some consistent messaging there. I also want to share the framework. Annemiek and I both told you that we come from the world of assessment. So the framework and what goes behind the success of partnerships and mentorship programs in general, and then share some specific data from one of our partner campuses. That's my intention. As Alex and Annemiek said, please feel free to ask questions along the way in the chat area, and we will address them as we can get to them. Oh, and by the way, Annemiek is going to show you how all this information comes together at the end as well. I should say that. So first of all, value that we bring, again, there are many people on this call, and we're really thankful for you for giving us this time and for joining us. You probably have different reasons for joining the call, and we keep that in mind. That's one of the reasons we focus on the areas of value that we want to bring in a peer mentorship program in partnership with you. The first is just engaging students authentically, whether it's the specific design of your program, be that connecting students with early alumni or collecting first-time students or transfer students with former first-time students and transfer students. Your design helps helps connect mentors and mentees authentically, but also the technology and the way we function is mentees can tell you what's most important to them in a mentor, and we can match, and they can be matched in that way and make sure that we honor what's most important to them. Another value that a partnership can bring is uncovering student insights. So there are different reasons students need support, and you could have multiple programs on campus. It would be a lot of work to meet all those individual needs. But with a flexible design and a flexible structure in the technology, we can give students specific points in time to let us know what they need, to indicate how they're feeling and what the resources they may need. And you can help support your peer mentors in giving them the resources and helping support their mentees in the way they need to. So without those insights, we can't really act on them, or campuses can't really act on them is what I should say. Every campus here also will have some sort of student success strategy, right? There are services and offices and resources and support systems that differ based on your campus, but we all have them and we all want to provide them for the students. With a mentorship program is kind of an overlay over a student success strategy that can help supercharge that or make sure that happens. We have, and I'll talk in more detail about that in just a bit. There are also probably people on this call who already have mentorship programs in place, little tiny ones or multiple, or maybe even a medium-sized one. But in order to serve all the students that you want to serve and make sure everyone gets the support they need, sometimes it takes some extra technology and services, and that's also what we provide in a partnership with campuses. So let me go back to a second for that journey to student success. For a student to enter into college and meet the goals they intend to meet, whether that's a certificate or completing a program or completing a degree and then transferring to another opportunity, all of our campuses have the support systems in place. What is frustrating oftentimes that we hear from campuses is that students don't always take advantage of those services, right? They don't talk to their advisors or they don't show up at the tutoring center. And the way mentorship fits in, specifically peer mentorship, is it's an overlay over the student success system. It's not replacing advisors, but it's providing a dashboard where advisors can look at student data or information about students so they can advise more in a more specific way. It is not replacing mental health counseling, but it's connecting with a peer who says, I have used the counseling center before, or I have used the tutoring center before. I really encourage you to do that, and giving that peer nudge that we all know is so effective in working with other students. So that's the way that that Mentor Collective can supercharge your student success strategy. We also have data from our partners who have measured this specifically on their own. UNC Greensboro took a look at students who were mentored versus those who were not mentored and surveyed them and their use of support services and support offices on campus, and found that universally students who were mentored tend to use those services more often. That's from our partners, but this shows up in literature and consultation reports all over the place that indeed, when students have this, have a peer nudge available to them, they will tend to use those support services more often. How do we know this though? How do we know that mentorship is effective, and where does the data come from that helps us know that? There is an assessment structure, an assessment framework in place for all mentorship programs, and this would be available to you if you were to partner with Mentor Collective. We're not going to talk about all these outcomes, but they basically fall into two categories. There's way mentorship supports students and helps students become successful. The one we're going to focus on specifically today is how we assess and foster student success factors. So all of those things we asked you about at the beginning. Do you have data associated with sense of belonging? Do you have data associated with academic help seeking? That's built into the design of a mentorship program, mentor collective mentorship program. And you would have those data available to you for your program specifically. And Annemiek will show you exactly how that happens. We also think about student success from the college lens as well, right? Students feel like they belong, or have the academic self-efficacy to help them succeed. But what can the college or campus or program do to help support those students, and where do they get that information? That's the college outcome we're going to focus on today, is some ideas of how to act on the student provided data, how you get that data, how you see that data, how to interpret that data, both individually so that you can respond to your students exactly when they need it and exactly how they need it, but also in aggregate so you can look at trends on how your students are feeling at different points in the academic year. We're going to focus on two non-cognitive or student success factor areas today. We're going to talk about sense of belonging, which is essentially feeling like you matter. We can all understand what sense of belonging is. We talk about it all the time in higher ed, but it's nice to give it a definition for the purposes of discussion. Also, academic self-efficacy. This is a student's belief that they're going to succeed in their academic courses and are going to succeed academically. Why do we focus on these two? Because the literature says they matter. So if you think about academic self-efficacy, this is most closely associated with academic performance. But why, right? That's what the research says. What does it mean in layman's terms? If a student feels like they can handle courses coming into college, they're probably going to be motivated to take the courses they want to take and the ones that are ultimately going to get them the job that they want. If they struggle a little bit in the course, but they get support, they feel supported, and they ultimately succeed, they're going to finish that course successfully and be empowered. And once they do that, and they know the support systems are in place and know how to navigate the system, they're gonna persist through multiple courses and ultimately, all the way to graduation. Peer mentors have been through that experience and can help students feel that way along the way. Sense of belonging, less associated with academic performance, is more associated with retention. If you feel like you belong or you feel like you matter, you tend to stick around when you feel that way. If a student sees themselves on campus, and that starts with a peer mentor who shares an affinity or an identity or a life experience and helps them see on campus where there are other people who share those things as well, they're likely to stay around. And it also, retention also shows up in mentorship. If a student has had opportunities, has successful opportunities to get over challenges, they want to contribute and they want to mentor as well. Again, they will stick around. So, that's the general reason we look at these success factors like academic self-efficacy and sense of belonging. We also have data from our partners at UNC Charlotte, where they have a program specifically for first-time students who don't have a major. Looking at sense of belonging data from a recent program, overall it increases. There are, Annemiek will probably give you these details, but there are 3 points in a Mentor Collective program that you can measure these different success factors. And you can look at the difference from how students are feeling at the beginning of the time frame of your mentorship program and at the end, and see the influence that mentorship has on someone who might have a low sense of belonging at the beginning and at the end. And this is a real quote from a real mentor who said, I had moments where I didn't feel great on my campus, or I was confused or didn't feel like I belong, and I wanted to help students who felt that same way. They also have positive data for academic self-efficacy, right? Same thing, measured at multiple points. And it's great to show positive numbers, to show a change over time in these success factors. But I want to focus in on the line chart for a second. We're not talking about overwhelming numbers of students that we have to intervene with. This campus was able to see that when they initially let students indicate how they were feeling in the area of academic self-efficacy, 2 had lower scores or rated themselves lower on academic self-efficacy. That's completely reasonable. That's completely actionable, right? That's 2 people who can be sent a little nudge about the tutoring center or a little check-in from their advisor to make sure that they have a course load that's accessible. It is the action from knowing a student is feeling a certain way and providing them with the resources, the peer mentor to have the encouraging conversation that leads to those positive results in the end. So I hope that all makes sense. You can see how we're structured, how our framework works, some of the data and the positive stories. Annemiek's going to actually show you how to access this information now. So I'm going to stop sharing and pass it over to Annemiek.
Great. We are going to talk through exactly how Mentor Collective collects these data and show you how you can interact with it as a user in the system. So Shannon mentioned that these surveys, these assessments that are sent to students at different stages in their mentorship experience, they're research-backed, which means the questions are consistent. Also means you don't have to think about, how am I going to assess my mentorship program? What are the concepts I should be considering? But they are designed to collect data from students at multiple points around each of these key areas. So we have a few different types of assessments depending on the goals of your program, and they measure slightly different pieces of information. For instance, our student success assessments, which is the most commonly used, are going to measure sense of belonging, academic self-efficacy, academic help seeking, and there is an element here about the strength of the mentorship relationship. This is less about the outcomes of mentorship or data that you're going to use necessarily to drive a student success intervention, but it is important information for you to understand either one, places where you might want to provide some more coaching to a mentor, or also overall some indicators of the ways that you can improve the design or support of your mentorship program. Our strategic enrollment assessments are also going to include some information about what factored into enrollment decisions. Our adult online assessments are also going to include some information about career decision self-efficacy. And then career assessments are going to focus more on concepts like career decision self-efficacy, use of career services and professional skills, instead of concepts like sense of belonging and academic self-efficacy. They're usually at a different stage in the student's experience and a different time in mind. This is an example of that most common type of assessment. So this is the survey instrument that a student would receive through the system. Students will receive their first invitation to complete a survey when they begin their mentorship journey. And then I'll show in a moment a few more times. But you can see some of the phrasing of these questions. One, they're very positively phrased. They're really leaning in on the concept of reinforcing the behaviors that students can pursue as a student at the institution, like I'm confident that I can achieve my goals. I feel supported at my school. And these are mapped to different factors. As I mentioned, the help seeking, for instance, is this center section about how likely are you to reach out to professionals, send emails to professors, and so on. So what we're thinking about here is how can we use these data for intervention, but also how can we use these responses for a better understanding of our student success factors. The sequencing of these data collection moments, as I mentioned, if we think about the first year student experience program, we're usually collecting the first set of data right at the start of their at matriculation, essentially. So mentee recruitment will begin usually at the start of school. Students will shortly thereafter be prompted to do a number of things like complete a matching survey, register their information in the system, and complete the start of program survey. There's also a moment in the mid-program, and this is really up to the institution to decide when is the next moment when I want formative feedback from my mentors and mentees about their experience. When am I well positioned to do something with these data? We find that that is typically in that post winter break, if you're on a semester basis, maybe start of the next term, things might feel a little different for the student from an academic self-efficacy perspective. They could be advancing beyond their first term, and sometimes academic self-efficacy will dip after some experiences that they have. And then finally, the end of program survey, which is really at the conclusion, which we usually find programs will close at the conclusion of the academic year. And this same model is reproduced for a program that is designed to drive MELT as well. So some institutions will start their programs before the first day of schools, maybe during that summer orientation period, or even shortly after acceptance, or that concept of a career or continuing student program, which potentially start later in the academic year and are focused more on those upper class students. The other thing I want to mention is that when we're thinking about using these data, the Mentor Collective platform also has the opportunity to incorporate data from your student information systems, like participant attributes, like their demographic information, their registration in a certain academic college, their GPAs, whether they're first generation students, et cetera, so that you can sort and filter and slice and dice some of these results and also focus on different student populations. You might have a professional at your institution who is in particular responsible for your online learners or your international students or your first generation students or a certain academic house or program. And this really allows different folks to interact with the tools and isolate down to the students that they're working with and help understand and interact with their data. So we are going to jump into a live demonstration now. And I'm going to walk you through how our platform will help you use these data. I'm currently logged into a demonstration partner dashboard of the Mentor Collective product, and I'm immediately greeted with a data visualization that's helping me understand some key metrics related to the mentorship program that I'm actively running. In this particular case, I'm looking at a population of mentees. I'm logging how many conversations they're having with their mentors, and I'm breaking that down by college, right? This just gives me a sense of, am I enrolling and supporting what quantity of students in my program? If I scroll down a little bit more and I'm looking at this 2,000 plus students who are having some type of mentorship experience here, I'll see an assessments tab. And this is really helping me manage how much data do I have from these assessments, and then what is it telling me about my students? So the first thing I can see is what percentage of these students are actually responding to that starter program assessment, that mid assessment, or that final assessment. I'm going to scroll down to this bottom right visualization to start so I can kind of see the completion rates, have a really strong start here with almost half of our students completing the starter program assessment, and that's dipping off. That dip off isn't that uncommon, but it could encourage me to do a little bit more motivation or nudging on the students who are maybe not responding to that middle program assessment. Shannon likes to say this often, and I agree. There's a fair amount of indicators that simply responding to a call for feedback in and of itself is an engagement point. So a student who isn't responding is kind of telling you something about their experience. A student who is responding is also telling you something about their experience. So you might want to start thinking about, how am I engaging that non-respondent population? In all of these, the rest of my visualizations here are giving me a sense of what the students are saying, not which students are responding, but how they are responding. I can see how my sense of belonging score is changing over time for my mentees as the assessments, more assessments are administered and as time is passing. And I can also toggle both mentee and mentor and by assessment area. So academic self-efficacy driving down, sense of belonging driving up in this particular aggregated look at these responses over time. I can break this down by the items that make up that factor. So our sense of belonging assessment area has 3 questions. I feel comfortable at my school. I feel supported. I feel like an important member of my community. Not every question has identical responses. So how are those different? Is there a certain strength or area of opportunity for my institution? One thing I want to say is I love looking at this. This is my personal favorite visualization of the assessment results here, largely because if you toggle to mentor, you get some really interesting information about how sense of belonging is cultivated in a group of students who already have a pretty strong sense of belonging. The reality of signing up to be a mentor is they're kind of participating as a leader in your institutional environment. But we actually see in quite a few institutions really significant gains in this last question of, I feel like I am an important member of my school's community. So how is being part of an official mentor for that institution further driving their sense of belonging, not just the mentees themselves? Okay, so what I can see here, both are these details, and then I can also see the overall distribution of scores. This gives me a sense of, like, if I want to run an intervention on a subpopulation based on a threshold, like it's a 5-point scale, so score below 3, like what's the quantity of outreach I have to do here? So in this case, I'd be talking about how can I prepare myself or my coaches or my peer staff members to do some intervention with 197 students, right? I can also further refine and filter and sort into that particular thing and export these participants as filtered results and start to divide up or use this in an email campaign or use this as an invitation to a program and service, etc. The main thing I want to focus on, though, besides these aggregate results, is the notifications feature. So this is the idea that in addition to being able to look at these aggregate results, I can also act in real time by seeing all of the participants who have reported that low sense of belonging or that lower academic self-efficacy. Here is that example as well, where I can even sort and filter this into first generation status, maybe even a specific academic college, so that I can focus on just the students that I need to focus on if I'm the first generation student coach for a certain academic program. If I want to look closer at what is happening with one of these students, I can go into their profile. And this profile is going to put that assessment result in context for us. So here I can see that this particular student, Abram, is connected to other connecting to a couple other folks here, mentees and mentors. I can view what that person's sense of belonging score is and what their academic self-efficacy score is. And I can scroll down and actually see the details of those individual responses. This particular student has completed an initial assessment and a mid-assessment, and I can compare and see how those have changed over time. This really could allow me to intervene or support or reach out with a student. It could allow me to coach a mentor on working with a mentee, being able to see some of these details in the history here as well. And then finally, the last thing I want to share here is the ability to export and analyze these data in aggregate. All of our mentorship data is available to us at any time, but in particular, I can export all of my assessment survey data for my mentors or mentees, and I'll receive this very detailed file that has information about who those users are. I could potentially integrate this with other data that I have at my institution, every single one of their responses and their open-ended responses as well. So if you remember, we have some questions in our surveys about do you have any feedback on that program? What worked well for you? And I can start to analyze and assess this as well, in addition to some of these look for some trends as well in these data. Shannon, what is your favorite part of the new assessment features? What's the biggest impact you're seeing it have in the conversations you have with partners as you're discussing this with them?
I see two examples on the ends of a spectrum. One is how easy it is to see students who have low self-ratings in either of those areas. There were some questions in the chat about response to surveys, and one of the examples I gave is when students start to see action or responses or the fact that their voice is being heard, that goes a long way towards them responding to future surveys. And I love the fact that we can very easily get to the individuals and provide them with the support they need. On the other end of the spectrum, it's those exports, because there's all kinds of analysis that can be done with the raw data. And more often, we're having conversations with institutional research offices where the data that is only available through the Mentor Collective program is being incorporated into other on-campus analyses like predictive analytics or other analyses, because they now have information they didn't have before.
So just to recap before we jump into questions here, What we're really focused on within the functionality that you see here is how these peer relationships, these student to student peer relationships and insights, both from the student themselves and from their peer mentor or mentee, can contribute to your overall assessment plan. How are you taking the assessment results and findings and plans that you have for your institution and adding in that layer of the student's experience and the peer feedback as well to help you provide leading indicators of retention, leading indicators of academic success in a way that can be timely and actionable for you and your team. I'm going to pause and see what kinds of questions we might see in the chat that we want to address before we wrap up this afternoon.
I can let you know, Annemiek, that while you were giving that lovely demo, there were a couple of questions, or a few questions, but we addressed them in writing along the way.
Great. Yes, also feel free to ask a question if you'd like to. I want to add very common topic of discussion for us is how do you maximize survey responses from your students? Like, this data are really powerful. How do we get as many students as possible to give us that insight? And one thing to know is that these are incorporated into their overall mentorship experience. So they're really getting these invitations to take these surveys. They'll see like a to-do list on their dashboard along with everything else they're asked to do. So I think a key part of it is incorporating it into the student's experience, but also reflecting on the value of these responses. How are we modeling to the student that the data are being used, especially with the mentors? I would say this is really relevant, telling them, explaining to the mentors that as a mentor, you're going to be asked for your feedback. You're going to be asked to tell us about your experience is really important to the overall success of this work. And then incentives are certainly helpful. And again, showing you some of those exports, you can easily log in, look at everyone who completed the end of program survey, grab that email list, pull a random raffle number, provide that student with a gift card to the bookstore or parking pass for a day or whatever it is that you know is incentivizing to your students. And our team here also sends nudges and reminders to students based on whether they have actually responded or not to help keep those numbers up.
One other thing I want to point out, in all of the surveys, the assessment surveys and the matching surveys and the opportunity for mentors and mentees to log a call and say they had a conversation with each other, are the value of the open-ended responses. It wasn't our focus today, but I want to encourage anyone who would use this to know that there are many opportunities for the students to tell us what they're feeling, to tell us what they need, and they do, right? They provide us with those responses, and being able to hear from their own voice and see their own responses to open-ended questions can really make the difference from a student sticking around or not.
Also wanted to point out a great question Jonathan asked via chat, Shannon, around percentage changes to retention.
Please, what kind of percentage changes to retention has? I'm sorry, I had to read out loud the question as it comes in. Not every program has a goal of retention, right? So I want to say that as well. You can always check out our website for some immediate overview data and dig deeper into white papers and case studies available. There is mentorship in general, not just Mentor Collective, has a positive impact on retention. It is because we help students feel like they belong. It is because we get them the resources. It is because and when I say we, I'm saying we as campuses listen to their voice. So depending on the program and the design and how it's measured and who the mentee populations are, the actual percentage change in retention varies, but it's almost always positive.
Holly has linked in the chat here a link on our website that includes the results of one of our analyses of a group of partners that shows a 5.6% retention rate. What I will note too as well is those impacts vary quite a bit by the student population. So the most powerful, the strongest impacts of mentorship are in certain student groups that tend to have the biggest gaps in retention and the most opportunity for greater student success outcomes. So sometimes the impact that an institution sees depends on who they're targeting the program to, if they are targeting it. And it really, institution by institution, will either offer mentorship in general to the student population to opt in, or they may make it part of an overall initiative, like first generation students, Black men of color initiatives, and so on and so forth, depending on the women in engineering, all of these types of targeted areas. I want to add that if you would like to speak more with us in a consultation, Alex is going to throw up a chat question, I believe, and a form that you can indicate that you would like to have some more dedicated one-on-one time to talk through what you're trying to do, how the Mentor Collective platform can support you, how you might want to target or drive mentorship towards achievement of your student success goals. We'd be happy to chat with you more about that. And again, please, an invitation to visit our website to learn more, and also to stay in touch, because we plan to continue to offer more of these small learning engagements and quick glimpses into what you might be able to leverage if you choose to pursue a partnership with Mentor Collective. So stay tuned for additional invitations, and please let us know how we can help.